So this organization called the Center for Jewish Nonviolence is less than 3 years old. It was started a little more than 2 years ago. The people who are participating were so young, almost all of them were in their 20s. There was 130 people, probably more than 100 of them were about my children's age, or somewhere in their 20s. They're millennials. And I just want to step back, like my own experience of the past few months. I'm a member of the Jewish Voice for Peace in the States, and I went to the Jewish Voices for Peace national meeting in Chicago. And there was, just to put this in context, I went 4 years ago to the same meeting. There were 200 people there. When I went in April, there were 1,000. And out of that 1,000, the majority of them were in their 20s. So I'm used to being in organizations, even if you just look around this room and see the age profile or the demographics of who's here, you know, I'm used to being with people more or less my own age. And it feels like there's like a wave of young Jewish people getting involved in a very different way. So the Jewish Voice for Peace National Members Meeting, there was probably over 500 people in their 20s. The week right before that, there was an AIPAC conference. Does anybody here not know what AIPAC is? No?
I think you should explain what it is.
Okay, so AIPAC is the Zionist lobby in the States. It is a huge, well-established lobby that I would say, when it comes to foreign policy in Israel, it controls Congress. It can buy and sell senators and members of Congress. If a member of Congress does something AIPAC doesn't like, AIPAC can pretty well get rid of them, just get them voted out. I think every single member of Congress knows that. Recently, there was a letter sent by the Senate to Israel endorsing something that Israel wanted. 100 senators signed it. Bernie Sanders signed it. Right? And this is not because it's what they believe in, it's because AIPAC controls every single one. AIPAC can pour tens of millions of dollars into an election and just get rid of whoever they want to get rid of. And it's been like this for decades. And if you just follow like a logic chain, much of what Israel does isn't supported by any other country in the entire world. There are votes in the UN, there are votes in the UN Security Council that just get vetoed by the United States. Right? The United States provides Israel with military support, diplomatic support, other support. Israel is the #1 recipient of foreign aid from the United States, even though its standard of living and its economy is comparable to many countries in Western Europe. Israel gets like more foreign aid than any other country. I'm just making a point about how Israel is able to continue doing what it's doing to the Palestinians, largely because it's supported by the United States. Support from the United States largely is because of AIPAC. So the reason I'm saying that is that AIPAC had its annual conference the week before the Jewish Voice for Peace national meeting. And every year, a number of people, probably kind of like us, go to the AIPAC conference and stand outside with placards and have protests and maybe chant something or protest it. They just protest it, and has no more effect than, I don't know what, just virtually no effect whatsoever. So the week before our Jewish Voice for Peace conference, complete surprise to me, 800 young Jewish people took buses from all over the eastern US, from like Philadelphia, Boston, Cleveland, Chicago. They converged on the AIPAC conference with the intention of disrupting it. They took chains and bicycle locks, they locked the doors shut, they chained themselves onto it, it took the police to pry them off of it. There was some violence. They were totally prepared for it. It was a total surprise to me to see that happening. So I'm just saying something about what I see going on. There was this AIPAC conference that 800 or more young Jews came to disrupt it, not to protest it necessarily. They were really making a very forceful point about stopping it. The next week, over 500 of them came to our Jewish Voice for Peace conference. And then this project that I just came back from, it was almost all people in their 20s. So it gives me a sense that there is just like a rising tide of these young people. Most of them are deeply, deeply involved in Jewish life. They grew up in synagogues, they went to Jewish parochial day schools, their parents sent them on summer programs to Israel. Maybe they went to a year of university in Israel. I would say a lot like my kids did, growing up with a father who's a rabbi. Some of their parents are involved in AIPAC. Some of their parents are like the directors of the Jewish Federation in such and such town. And I was with them and I asked them, what's going on? What changed for you? How come, you're doing this? You're not just kind of following the party line. And you're not just walking away. You're not just saying, this is all so disappointing and so upsetting and so immoral. I can't stand it. I'm leaving. They're not doing that. They're very, very engaged in trying to make change. So the ones I talked to, they told me, they just feel like a moral obligation to change it. Some of them said that Judaism itself has become occupied by this kind of Zionism that is so expansionist and so forceful and so inhumane. They want to reclaim it. So their goal is to transform the American Jewish community, most of them are American, and at the same time to withdraw American support from what Israel's doing. So I just want to give that as just a kind of background. Let me see if I can operate all this technology while I'm talking. Hold on a sec. I also thought, besides just talking, I want to show you some pictures. So this is a picture from the same organization last year did another action, and you can see their t-shirts saying, "Occupation is not our Judaism." And something interesting to me about this organization and others that are involved with so many young people is they're not taking a very sharp stand on some of the political issues that divide people who want to change things for the better. I would say there's kind of a peace camp or a peace movement. Some people support BDS, some people don't support BDS. Some people are in favor of a two-state solution, some are in favor of a one-state solution. This organization just doesn't take a stand on that. They want to end the occupation, and they want to end American Jewish support for the occupation. And here's one of their slogans: "We strive for a future that honors the full equality and shared humanity of both Palestinians and Israelis." And they further say, "We engage in creative, nonviolent activism in the occupied Palestinian territories and Israel with the aim of bringing an end to the occupation." So I'm saying that to give some of us, perhaps, a way to kind of broaden who we work with, to have broader coalitions, and to be able to do perhaps more powerful and more effective actions. I think it makes really good sense to have our own positions and to be in organizations that do have positions on the issues, but to try not to let those issues separate us from what could be natural allies and partners in a bigger struggle. And that's, I think, one of the keys to the success of these groups that were together in this action that we did. So this is just a picture I put together. This is who I was with. I mean, just look at the age of the people that are there. It's very exciting. Especially the one with pink hair. It's a Jewish woman who speaks really good Arabic and Hebrew. A lot of these people, like I said, they've lived there for some years. Very involved and very committed. So what did we do? Let me see. We were 130 people. We split into 5 groups. And we did projects for 3 days in 5 different locations. where Palestinians have organizations on the ground that are working like years and years and years, supporting their own communities, helping to anchor their communities, keep their communities there. And they each had projects that they wanted some support and some help with. Everything we did was planned for months with Palestinian partner organizations on the ground. And there was some concern about kind of us going in to support them, and then what would happen when we left. Because when we're there, they're somewhat protected from the violence that they could experience from Israeli military and the border police, and also from settlers, because if we're there, they're not going to commit that violence in such a blatant way. But after we leave, there could be really harsh retaliation. I mean, just incredible violence to just smash whatever got accomplished. So the Palestinian partner organizations thought this through. Of course, they're way more aware of it than we are. They live with it day in and day out. It's their reality, and they wanted us to come. So I'm just going to show you kind of quickly all 5 of the sites, and then talk more about the one that I was involved with. So this is a town called Isawiya. I'm just curious, if you know about Isawiya, would you just raise your hand? Interesting. Isawiya. One and one way in the back. Okay, so I'll talk about Isawiya a little bit. I hope I can, there's so much I want to tell you. I don't know how I can fit this all in 45 minutes, but Isa, first of all, is the Arabic name of Jesus. Isa. So there's a town right next to Jerusalem. You might have the image of Jerusalem. And then there's Mount Scopus. There's kind of like a mountain that goes up. The back slope of it has a beautiful town called Isawiya, where Jesus was at some time. And I first lived in that place in Jerusalem in 1971. It was 4 years after the occupation began. And I was a 19-year-old, perhaps idealistic and naive Jewish American. And I thought, oh, how nice. I will just go and visit people. And I walked through Isawiya, and people were so friendly. I remember people opening their doors and saying to me, come in, sit down, have some tea, have some cake. And I actually remember sitting and people gathering around to talk with me, and tea and cake, and every time I finished the tea, they poured me some more tea, and I had to drink it, kept drinking and drinking and drinking, wondering when can I ever stop drinking this tea? I remember one young Palestinian guy said to me, if I swish the cup before I put it down, that's a sign that I don't win anymore, There was so much hospitality and generosity. So that was 1971, and it was very open. I had a feeling of real kind of hopefulness that the literal division for almost 20 years of a land that had not been divided, that division had fallen, and there was great openness. I felt great hopefulness that somehow everybody would be able to live together and things would be okay. It would work out. I don't know if anybody on the ground had a plan, but I just remember walking through Isawiya with so much warmth and friendliness like that. And it was very clear I was like a Jewish person, but no hostility or anything like that. Since then, Israel has appropriated or confiscated, or whatever you want to call it. What's the right word for it? Just taken.
Stolen.
What's the word?
Stolen.
Stolen is another good word. Isawiya was a prosperous town. It had lots and lots and lots of land all around it. So that land has been taken piece by piece. If you've been in Jerusalem and you know a neighborhood called French Hill, that's all built on land that was Isawiya's land. And more and more and more, and Israel has taken part of their land to build a massive, huge settlement called Ma'alei Adumim. That's east of Jerusalem, between Jerusalem and Jericho. For 50,000 people live there. And Israel now has a whole project of creating what they call a national park on the eastern slope of Mount Scopus. It's kind of bizarre. There's nothing special there in terms of nature. There's no particular historical value to it. It's just a way to take more land away from Essaouira and push Essaouira smaller and smaller. Just another thing about, you've probably heard all this before, I don't know who knows what, but Israel completely controls the life of the people on the West Bank in Palestine, like in virtually every way. So one of those ways is nobody can build anything without a building permit from Israel, and Israel just doesn't give building permits. So when people, they can apply for a building permit, they can spend thousands and thousands of dollars in an attempt to get one. They don't get them, and then they just go ahead and build anyway because their families are expanding. It's been 50 years, they need more buildings. This picture you see on the wall is Essaouira, but it didn't look like that when I was first there, like 45 years ago. So people build, and then a lot of their buildings just get demolished. This picture that you see right now, it's from May. It's from earlier this year, demolition. Somebody invested, who knows, tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars to build what they need for their family or their business, and Israel will just come and demolish it, and this happens over and over and over again. So one of the places we went was Essaouira, and the idea was to help them do something that would help them hold on more or hold on better. And I think simply having a couple dozen foreign Jews show up and work with them gives them a kind of support and encouragement and lets them know we're paying attention. I honestly think there's a bit of a pretense to think that if we help them paint a wall or plant a garden or start to put down some stones and build something, that it's not going to last. Israel can just bring in a bulldozer or bring in one of those machines and just smash it the next day. But the kind of moral support or solidarity that we give is important for just helping people hold on. They wanted that way. Excuse me just a sec. So one of those places was Essaouira. Another place we went was in Hebron, and you might know about Hebron. There's something like, I don't remember the exact numbers, 170, 180,000 Palestinians living in a big city. It was a thriving, bustling, active city. There are about 800 Jewish settlers that live in the middle of it, that are surrounded by thousands of Israeli soldiers, ostensibly to protect those people, but they actually just shut down the city, and there's the same issue there with building and everything else. I feel like I need to go a little quicker here. Oh, this is Hebron. Excuse me. This is a place in Jerusalem. Thank you. It's really the same story everywhere, where Palestinians' lives are so controlled, like in every different dimension. It's impossible for them to build, and in many places Israel is just destroying what they have built. So in Jerusalem, below the Temple Mount, in a kind of a valley, in Hebrew it's called the Kidron Valley, there's an old neighborhood called Silwan, and in that old neighborhood, some, just say Jewish extremists, identified certain places as being where King David built his palace, or something like that. They found what they think are old ruins of old Jewish sites. I want to say they're not even Jewish, they're biblical, and the term Jew wasn't even used in the time of the Bible. Those people in the Bible are probably about as much the ancestors of the Palestinians as they are the ancestors of the Jews, but there's a kind of ideology that just suppresses and denies all that. So they have found these sites that they identify as Jewish biblical sites and have just wiped away Palestinian homes, just torn them away, and created something that they call a national park. that's a little bit almost like a Disneyland, and Jewish tour groups go there. If you go with a Jewish tour group from Canada, most likely you would go there. No one would talk about the fact that Palestinians were living exactly right there and their homes are just wiped away. You don't see them. And that process is ongoing as there's this kind of expansionist drive of Israel just taking more and more and more and more. So there's a place kind of in Suwan called Batan al-Hilwa, and we went there, and like in Isawiya, we helped with like a little project, just like painting walls or building a playground or something. I don't remember exactly what it was, and I didn't go there. But it was a very similar thing where there's just constant pressure on the Palestinians, and I mean like very physical, real pressure backed up by military and police. It's a constant struggle. I mean, even when the kids walk to school, they have stones thrown at them, settlers spit on them, just children trying to go to school. It's a long story. Anyway, this is another place where we went. This is the city of Hebron, where you probably know, like I just said, there's several small pockets of Jewish Israeli settlers who are really like fanatic extremists, living in a city of 170,000 Palestinians. And I don't remember how many years ago, 25 or 30 years ago, one really insane settler went into the mosque built on the site that's said to be where Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Rebecca and others are buried, and he opened up fire with a machine gun and killed 29 Palestinians while they were praying. He wounded like another 150 or 170 or something like that.
Goldstein.
I'm sorry?
His name Goldstein.
Yes, his name is Goldstein. I don't even want to say his name. But the brilliant Israeli government after that shut down the main parts of the commercial district of Hebron to avoid further conflict. So, it would, you know, I can't give you an analogy in Hamilton, but you can imagine if the main street in the main shopping district was shut down, something like 25 or 30 years ago, Palestinians are not allowed to walk there. It's like a ghost town. People that own businesses can't open them. People that lived in homes there can't go to them. I feel like what I'm telling you is just like a tiny, tiny speck of a fraction of what Palestinians live with, day in and day out, year after year after year. So this is like a checkpoint in Hebron, and that kind of expansionism, just eating away, almost on a daily basis, of Palestinian space, was something that we went to try to help resist. So in Hebron, there's an organization, fairly new. There's many organizations of many kinds, even the municipality of Hebron itself, but there's an organization called Youth Against Settlements that's organized and led by a man named Issa Omro. And his models are like Gandhi and Martin Luther King, and he cites Jesus, among other people, modeling nonviolent resistance, which is strong, solid, strong resistance, but nonviolent. So we went to help support them in a project that they have. I'll just move it along a little bit. This is a place you may have heard of called Susia. This is getting closer to where I was. Susia is in the South Hebron Hills, meaning south of Hebron, in a fairly barren place. I mean, just look, there's no trees, there's no grass, it's very kind of, you know, hard pan place that's hard to make a living. The people who have lived there for years and years are herders. They have herds of sheep and goats, and that means that they roam around. They need a lot of space to move in, and they live very, very simply, often living in caves. And they've lived in caves for generations. So this is another place where some settlers identified like an archaeological site as being where there was an ancient synagogue. So of course that meant that they had every right in the world to claim it as their own, to move in, to set up a settlement, turn this ancient synagogue site into a kind of a tourist site for Israel, and push out the people who had lived there before in this place called Susia. So Susia has had an enormous struggle for some years with a lot of support from internationals. So we also went to Susia to help them. Just build little things there to make their clinging to their land a tiny bit easier. And again, I think just our presence probably meant more than anything that we could do on a physical level. Let me just see what. I'll just pause. I'm just curious. Do you have any questions so far? Anything you want to raise? I don't want to just keep talking and talking if there's. So I think I see one hand in the middle, another in the back, another on the side. Let's just have these three.
I'll take the mic and loud.
Oh, just do it. Let's do it really loud. I'll hear you.
Okay.
Oh, my name's Paul. I have read, you mentioned the Youth Against Settlements. I have just read that the man who was applying the nonviolent tactics is now being detained. And it's a celebrated case. He has had trumped up charges thrown against him. I can't remember his name. Omri, is it?
Yeah.
That's the man.
Paul.
Yeah, I just read about it in the press today.
Okay. Paul's pointing out that Issa Omro, who I just said, is a real hero of nonviolence. He is on trial. He has 18 charges against him. He's charged with such evil things as yelling at a settler. He's actually charged with spitting on someone, which I can't imagine he would do. That's not his orientation. He wouldn't do that. But he's on trial. He's on trial in a military court. The military has ruled this place for 50 years. The rate of conviction in the Israeli military court system is 99.7% conviction rate. So Issa Omro could be supported by people from outside of Israel, signing petitions, writing letters. I imagine you could Google him and find out something. I know he was written up, but was it in the foreword?
It may have been, but apparently some U.S. congressmen are supporting him, which is interesting because I can't imagine many Canadian parliamentarians doing something similar. But
Well,
in U.S. Congress, despite the power of AIPAC for arson.
That's right.
You must know about that.
I do, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's even a letter being circulated among American rabbis, and American rabbis should write to American members of Congress that they should write to Israel to say, I don't know what, give him a fair trial, or whatever it would be.
Right.
But anyway, many ways that we can be involved from a distance in trying to help support the Palestinians. So thank you for just bringing that up about Issa Omro. You had a question or something?
Well, just in regard to Hebron, is the street Shuhada Street?
Yeah.
Shuhada. And is it part of what I heard was the worst neighborhood was the Tel Aviv neighborhood, and I know that the Christian peacemakers used to be active there. They had a project where they gave residents cameras. And is that a different area?
No, so just more detail. There's so much to learn and connect with. So the Shuhada Street is the name of that main commercial area. And I appreciate you mentioning the Christian Peacemaker Team. That's a group of Christians, many Canadians, who were invited and requested to come to Hebron to help de-escalate the violence. And when I say violence, it's from Israel toward the Palestinians. But when foreigners are there, and when the Israelis know they're being watched, they tone it down. And that's a lot of what we did. So you're mentioning that it's good for everybody. No, they're still there. They've been there they've been there more than 20 years.
And I tried to say Al Khalil because it's an Arabic name for the same. It is an Arabic city. But apparently both Hebron and Al Khalil refer to Abraham. Is that?
Long story. I don't want to go into those details. I'll just repeat out loud what you're saying. But I want to just. There's so much I want to share with you. So the Arabic name of the city that in English is called Hebron is Al-Khalil. Khalil means a friend, and it refers to Abraham, who bought some land there and is buried there. He was a friend of God, and it's just good to know the Arabic names of places.
We say Khalilullah.
Khalilullah,
Khalilullah is a friend of God.
a friend of God. One more, and then I'm gonna, okay, two more, and then I'll go back to my thing. So Robert.
David, did you have any more information about Susia? I seem to recall when I was there, is actually a third rendition of that village, that there were two other.
53rd.
Yeah, so Robert's saying that Susia has been actually destroyed and reconstituted, and destroyed and reconstituted. So this picture here is the kind of third resurrection of Susia, that people have been forced to move.
Yeah, they've moved from one spot to another, if I remember correctly.
Yep. There's again, this process of dispossession has repeated itself over and over and over in so many places. And I also just want to say it's not the occupation that began in 67, it goes back to 48. You know, I don't think there's, I think to have a distinction, one of my critiques of this group that I went with is that they do focus only on the occupation. Tactically, that might be a good idea. Strategically, also, that might be a good idea. But to really get it right, I don't think we should see the occupation that began in 67 as different from the Nakba, or the original dispossession of Palestinians that largely happened in 48. So Robert's talking about Susia, and they had to move here and they had to move there. They're still clinging onto these rocks, you know. But it's part of this process that has happened in hundreds and hundreds, perhaps in thousands of places, virtually everywhere. My sense is like every single Palestinian who still lives in Palestine is like, they're not there by accident. They are holding on like by their fingernails, you know, just holding on and holding on and holding on, because the great force is trying to just pry them off their land and get rid of them. So it's virtually everywhere. So what the heck, go ahead. In the middle.
Okay, I was wondering, the group of people in the blue t-shirts that you were talking about.
Yes.
And you said that many of them, would oppose BDS, or they wouldn't support it. Do they have any alternative proposal for, effectively pressuring Israel to end the occupation? Because I think a lot of the people who support BDS do so because they want the occupation ended and they want Israel to respect international law. My second question is, are they nervous about BDS because there's a certain amount of overlap between, like some of the people who support BDS just want the occupation ended, some of the people who support BDS want Israel dismantled, period. So, I'm wondering what the nervousness about BDS is.
I'll talk about that a bit. So, did everybody get the question? Anybody need clarification or anything?
What's the acronym stand for?
So BDS stands for boycott, divestment, and sanctions. And should I give a little background on that? Is that yes?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm not perfectly clear about all the details, but something like about 10 or 11 years ago, I think, a large number of Palestinian organizations, Palestinian civil organizations, which themselves are like repressed and struggling, but that means labor unions, women's organizations, student groups, like local town councils, all kinds of organizations, something like 170 of them, put out a call to people around the world to boycott, which means don't buy stuff. Divestment, which means if you have investments in companies that benefit and profit from the occupation, divest. get rid of those investments. It's like actually you are profiting from companies that are running the occupation. And sanctions means kind of blocking stuff that Israel would be trying to do, like in the UN, voting for sanctions against Israel. BDS. So it's a very broad call from Palestinian society to people all around the world to take that kind of action to pressure Israel to end the occupation, to stop it, to withdraw from it. And BDS, the boycott kind of thing, was a part of what put pressure on the South African government when it got strong enough. So wait a minute, okay, we could talk about any one of these things probably for 2 hours, The question was, why would some of these activists not support BDS?
And if they have an alternative tactic. for
Right,
pressure.
so I'll try to just kind of briefly address that, to say some of them think that Israelis in general, when they hear about BDS, their reaction is to become very defensive and even more aggressive, and to feel more that they have to assert themselves, that BDS kind of backs them into a corner, and it's not a productive or effective way to promote ending the occupation. Some of them would also say that there are many countries around the world that are committing crimes against humanity like Israel does, but we're not involved in campaigns to boycott them, right? China's invasion of Tibet, or, whatever.
America's invasion
I'm sorry?
of the world, America's invasion of half the world.
Right, and okay, so I would just say they have principled, well thought out reasons that they don't support BDS, but what I was impressed with was that this coalition could pull itself together without taking a stand on that, and could do these actions with just disagreement about those tactics, because it just wasn't about that, Is that a satisfactory answer?
Sort of.
Okay.
I mean, if they, if you remove BDS as in any form as a tactic, you've got to come up with
Right.
some other tactic
Right.
that is equally as strong, and I
Right.
don't, otherwise it's sort of a bit like saying we're opposed to poverty, but no, we don't want increased taxes on the rich, and we don't want more social spending.
Right. Well, I don't think anyone has the answer. I wouldn't suggest anybody adopt the program of any organization or any particular platform. You just have to think it out and see the best thing we can do. Those particular people, they are there on the ground themselves, speaking out strongly, loudly, presenting themselves, in the papers. They're using media. They may be advocating in Congress for something else, they're trying to change the American-Jewish relationship with Israel. I think they're doing a lot, and some of them do support BDS and some don't. So it's just something we each need to figure out, do what we can do that we think will be most effective. And it has to do actually with who we are, and where are we in the world, and what do we influence, and things like that. So let's make this the last one, and then I'll go back to my little program.
Yeah, I just want to say the village of Susha, I've been there many times.
Go ahead.
It's the largest village in the South Hebron Hills with about 150 people, all living in those conditions. If that village, it's under demolition orders now. If that village goes, there's not much hope for any of the other villages in the whole South Hebron Hills. So when I was there in April, there were 3 Jewish people that came, and they come regularly, and there's more. And we have to keep, the pressure has to be kept up to try and save Susha. And the Rabbis for Human Rights are very active in that campaign.
Yep, good. So there's a whole network of organizations. There are Israeli Jewish organizations. You just mentioned Rabbis for Human Rights, and others. There are international organizations. Some of them are church-based. And there are Palestinian organizations that support this tiny little village. And you can see in the background, I didn't make it explicit, but that's a settlement with those nice houses, built totally illegally on stolen land. And you also said that this village is under demolition orders, which means that any time Israel could just send in a bulldozer and just wipe it away. But there's virtually constant presence there from different organizations. And something I would say later, but I'll just say it now, is something we can do from here is support those organizations that go there and they're on the ground. And just again, helping the Palestinians just cling to what they have left. So this is Susia. I'm going to move on. My next slide is it's a map. Let's see, you can see that big brown blotch at the top. That is Hebron, which is a big city. South of that is a place called Yatta, which is a small city, but it's big enough to have a high school, to have a hospital. I can't tell you numbers of people that live there. You see the place with the yellow hatch marks? So that is what Israel declared as a firing zone, where its military can freely practice shooting off their weapons and running around shooting all kinds of things. So, of course, no one can live there. So Israel evacuated the people who live there. It keeps trying to do that.
There's,
Yeah.
I hiked there
Yep.
the end of March and came across 4 villages. And they're all under demolition orders, but of course, the people are very hospitable and invite you in for tea, but they're all very precarious lives. And there's big signs that says, you can't go there, it's dangerous to your life or whatnot. But I thought I would go to some of the villages. There are still some there.
Yep. And south of here is the Negev Desert. Israel's controlled it since 48, and there's plenty of room there for the Israeli military to practice shooting off their guns if they want to. They don't need to be there, so it looks like just an excuse to get these Palestinians away. And just as you said, people do live there, but they're under constant demolition order. So I wish I had a pointer. You see where it says Ma'on? Right up here. So that's a large, again, illegal settlement with very militant people. You can see just west of Ma'on, there's a place that says Atwani. That's a very small Palestinian village with some buildings and, I don't know, maybe a few hundred people. And you can see a place that says Carmel. That's another settlement. The settlements, I guess, are light blue. But that's just to situate us overall. Just move this along a little bit. It's a closer view of what I just was showing you. And at the top of this frame, it says al-Khair. Just to the west of that place, it says al-Fakr. So that's where I was for 3 days with about 15 other members of our group. And if you see it from a distance, it looks like this. It's very dry, scrubby land. And we walked through there and got a bit of a kind of a tour of the lay of the land. So this is us walking through on a road. It looks like a really tough place to eke out a living. And that is that settlement called Ma'on. And the history of this, again, Israel didn't control this at all until 1967. Around 1970, the Jewish National Fund, also known as the JNF, which is a tax-deductible charity in Canada. If you give them $1 million, all the Canadian taxpayers will subsidize that by giving you a big tax break. You can reduce your taxes by giving donations to the Jewish National Fund
Shame.
here in Canada. So that's something that Independent Jewish Voices is working on ending. But the Jewish National Fund did this very lovely, wonderful thing of planting trees. There weren't any trees there. Everybody knows that trees are a good thing. So they planted trees around 1970, and then, soon after that, some settlers went and settled in the midst of the trees, supported by the JNF. And you can see lower, they're on the top of the hills, they like taking over the hilltops. Below the hilltops, you see these other trees, those are olive trees that were planted by Palestinians that have lived there for centuries. And as you walk by, you can see that many of these olive trees have been cut down. And I think one reason why Palestinians identify with olive trees so much is they regenerate, they come back, they don't die so easily. You cut them down, they'll send out sprouts the next year, and the sprouts will grow into branches and they will become productive again. So I didn't get any pictures, but when you walk by those trees, you can see that the branches have been cut off and then start growing back again. I just want to take you a little closer. So we walked on this road. Can you just tell me your name? I know. Ineka. So Ineka mentioned walking around and seeing villages. So I wish I had a pointer, but you may see in the background there's a village with buildings. That's called Tawani. There's a school there. So the children that live in these little Bedouin villages, in order to go to school, they have to walk there. Some of them walk miles to get there. In the winter, it's very cold. It can rain in this place. In the summer, it's really hot. And the kids walk. It's like these old stories we've heard of our grandparents that walk like miles to school or something on this trail. And the settlers from Ma'on actually come out and hassle them. They throw stones at them. They threaten them with guns. They have dogs who are they use the dogs to attack the kids. It's totally insane what they do. So we're walking on that trail. You can see Tawani a little bit better. On the right-hand side are the trees planted by the JNF. And in 2005, a Knesset, Israeli parliamentary committee, ruled that the Israeli army had to accompany these school children on their way to school to protect them from the settlers. Thank you. So the Israeli army, let me see how this works. Oh, okay, that does the job. So the Israeli army now, since 2005, has had the job of protecting these little children from the settlers. Why they can't just stop the settlers from harassing them is another question. So very often the Israeli army shows up late, doesn't come at all, and when they do, they escort the children only part way, and then they just leave them. So,
I've sat with the kids.
I'm sorry?
I've sat with the kids waiting for the army to
Yeah.
come to school.
If the kids go without the army, they're very vulnerable. And there are international volunteers, like Ineka just said, I've sat with those kids. There are international volunteers who are in that town of Tawani, that little town. And when the army leaves the kids off, the international volunteers will pick them up and walk with them. So many details I could tell you, but this is a pole. I don't know if you can see, but there's a wire or a string that goes across to another pole, and another string that goes across here. And what that is, I immediately get what that is. It's called an eruv, and it's a thing that some religious Jews set up because on the Sabbath, according to Jewish religious law, you're not allowed to carry stuff from one place to another, right? It's a Sabbath, you're just resting, don't carry anything. So there's a legal fiction in Jewish religious law that allows us to put a perimeter around a place, and then everything inside the perimeter, it's all one place. So if you want to carry something to your neighbor's house, or you want to just take a walk in the trees and carry your lunch, or something like that, on the Sabbath, if you have an eruv, you have this little string around your space, then you can carry stuff on the Sabbath, and you're not breaking God's law for us humans, right? So I'm talking about this. I find it so offensive that these people's religious sensitivity leads them to go to such great lengths that they put up an eruv. Someone checks it every Friday afternoon before the Sabbath to be sure it's there. So they're very meticulous about these kinds of details, I call it minutia, of religious life. But at the same time, they see nothing wrong with stealing land, pushing other people off of it, harassing children. I didn't even tell you everything that they've done. But I put up that picture in there. Let me go back a bit. So, as we've said, there are little teeny, like Bedouin communities, and Bedouin are not like nomads that just wander. They have homes. They're connected to places, right? They live somewhere. They've dug like wells and cisterns. They may have been used like for hundreds of years. They build stone houses, right? It's not like this image that I used to have where Bedouin just wander all over the place and don't really belong anywhere. They belong somewhere. It's their homes. So these settlers have successfully driven out some of the Bedouin, and they've never managed to come back. Some of the things they've done, because the Bedouin have sheep and goats, it's the foundation of their lives, these settlers have spread rat poison all over the ground so the sheep and goats will eat it and die. That's one of the cute little things they did. And of course every other animal in the neighborhood eats it and dies. Another thing they've done, I'll just show you, the Bedouin, to have any water at all, they've dug cisterns. They've dug cisterns into the rock, and they make these little systems of I don't want to say gutters, but like little aqueducts or something to catch the water. When it rains and the water runs down a hillside, they'll bring the water into these cisterns and fill the cistern up, and that's the water that they have to live on. So these lovely settlers have taken dead animals and thrown them into the cistern, so that all the water gets polluted, and the people who depend on it can't live on it. They have to pump it all out, clean it out. They have no resources to do this with. They don't have electricity, and so on and so on. It's crazy. So this was something I was really pleased to see. Can you see this from where you're sitting? This is a Canadian flag. Foreign Affairs, Trade and Development Canada, rehabilitated with the support of the Government of Canada, blah, 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 United Nations, symbol of Palestine, the YMCA. So there's a lot of support for these people. And what they got here, this is what we did with our tax money. They got a pump, and they got some plastic piping that sends it off to their house. So now they don't have to come with a bucket and pull it up with muscle power and carry the bucket. So this is what Canadian taxpayers have done for this little village. And here's a picture of their house. It's basically covered with burlap and stuff. You can see the water tank on the roof. So the pump, when there is water, will pump it onto their roof. Sometimes Israeli settlers will just shoot their guns into the tank to make holes in it, so all the water will run out. They won't have any water. And then somebody has to go and fix the tank. And here in the background is the settlement of Ma'on, up on the top of the hill. This is in that village. Of course, that village doesn't have any building permit, so they're not allowed to build anything. If they build anything, Israel's own legal system says it's okay for Israel to demolish it. So this is a mosque. The people built a mosque, Israel demolished it, they rebuilt it, Israel demolished it again, they rebuilt it a third time, Israel demolished it again, and that's what it looked like a few weeks ago, and it looks like it's been like that for years. You can see why these people would just give up after a while. It's amazing that they don't. This is their homes. It's about as simple as you can get. And this is a little bit of a surprise to me. This is agriculture. So the people who live there, they have these herds and stuff, but they also grow wheat. And these tiny little patches of land. You can see like little spaces between rocks. They'll plant a few rows of wheat. And I took this picture because you can see back here, kind of like in a little valley or a stream bed, there's little fields. I mean, this whole thing's not even an acre, right? So these people really like eke out an existence on the land with such meager resources. That's what they've got. And it's amazing to me that they can do it at all. So I just took this picture to show you the wheat. It's very stubby, right? It's not like Saskatchewan. And here's that same settlement with all their lovely trees and all their water and all the, you know, they have pools, they have air conditioners, they have, you know, they live basically the same lifestyle that, you know, middle-class people in Hamilton do. A lot of people in Hamilton don't have as comfortable material life as the people in the settlement do. So, Inika, I saw your hand.
Yeah, that's actually an outpost, but just on the other side is the huge settlement.
Yep.
And then there's some farmers that you see there. You can't really, from your picture, see the settlement, how big it is. And then you have to go on the other side of the hill, and you're not actually, you know, I walked there, but, you know, then you get stopped by the security from the settlement.
Yep. We didn't even try. We didn't go near. Anyway, I just wanted to show you the environment. So the place that we went is near there. This is, I think I just showed you what it kind of looks like in the South Hebron Hills.